Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome back to The Explainer, and welcome to Series 4 of our Jio Platforms DRHP Deep Dive. Now, in previous episodes, we've already covered the wider market, the overarching business model, and some of those hidden structural risks. But today we are popping the hood. We're going to take a really focused structural look at the absolute core of Jio Platforms, the economic engine of their mobile connectivity business. Our goal here is simple, but honestly, pretty ambitious. We are going to map out exactly how Jio translates physical network assets into cold, hard cash, using only the disclosures straight from their draft red herring prospectus. So if you want to understand the actual literal mechanics of telecom economics, you are absolutely in the right place. To do this effectively, we're going to follow this roadmap. We'll start with the physical foundation, look at the user input, examine the monetization valve, map the flow of translating scale to cash, and then we'll wrap up with the constraints and put the whole engine into one clear picture. All right, Section 1, the physical foundation. It's a great question to ask. How does a digital, invisible business actually begin in the physical world? Well, it starts with exactly 26,800.8 megahertz. That is Jio's total spectrum holding as of March 2024. Now, you might be wondering, what does this all mean? Think of spectrum as the invisible real estate of the telecom world. You literally cannot build a digital highway without this land. This number represents the largest spectrum bank in the entire Indian industry, which immediately gives them a massive capacity advantage over legacy peers like Airtel and Vodafone Idea, right from the ground up. And the DRHP notes that this digital real estate has remaining average life of 16 years. So that's a very long runway to monetize this foundational asset without needing to immediately go out and replenish it. But it's not just the total sheer amount of spectrum, it's the mix. Jio is actually the only operator in India holding a balanced mix of low-band, mid-band, and millimeter wave spectrum for 5G across all circles. The 700 megahertz band, for example, is what gives you that really deep indoor coverage. And they've taken the spectrum and combined it with the deployment of over 1 million 5G cells in just a single year, hitting 99% population coverage. Plus, they deployed a standalone 5G network, meaning it doesn't rely on old 4G infrastructure at all. This creates an absolutely massive structural competitive advantage. It's basically a gigantic, highly efficient physical funnel that is ready to handle an immense amount of data. Moving on to Section 2, the user input. So we've built this massive funnel, right? But what exactly is pouring through it? 524.4 million customers. That's Jio's total customer base as of March 2024. This massive, unprecedented scale is the raw material for the whole engine. And we really need to understand the makeup of these users. You see, Indian telecom is heavily a prepaid market. That means revenue isn't just a given, it has to be constantly earned through frequent, ongoing recharges, which is very different from the stickier postpaid subscriptions you might see in Western markets. So Jio didn't just build a world-class network, they managed to bring over 500 million users onto it, making them the undisputed market leader. But simply having customers is just part one. The real magic of the Jio model is what those customers actually do once they're logged on. And this brilliantly illustrates the core economic premise of Jio's entire disruption. When Jio first launched, they completely blew up the industry's old economic model. They made voice calls free and charged exclusively for data. They crashed the price of data from a staggering 228 rupees per gigabyte all the way down to roughly 8 rupees by fiscal 2024. And look at what happened. As a direct result, average monthly data usage just exploded from virtually nothing to over 25 gigabytes per user. They collapsed the price, and consumption caught fire. Let's really contextualize that data consumption on Jio's network for a second. By the end of fiscal 2024, the per capita data consumption for a Jio user hit a staggering 42.3 gigabytes per month. And because Jio carries about 60% of India's entire wireless data traffic, this single-handedly helped make India the second largest generator of mobile data traffic on the planet. To put that 42.3 gigabytes into perspective, the average mobile data usage in the USA and China is hovering around just 16 to 18 gigabytes per month. There's really no other way to say it. It's mind-boggling. Your typical Jio user is consuming more than double the data of an American user. This hyperactive usage is the direct input feeding Jio's monetization machine. Which brings us to Section 3, the monetization valve. Jio has over 524 million customers consuming a mountain of data. But how effectively does that usage actually translate into real money? To figure that out, we have to look at the ARPU. That stands for Average Revenue Per User. Think of ARPU as the crucial valve that dictates the flow of revenue. In simple terms, it's just the average monthly revenue generated from each individual customer. Now, in a business where voice calls are free and data is incredibly cheap, Carefully controlling and slowly turning up this ARPU valve is literally the primary way to grow the top line without just relying on finding new customers. So for fiscal 2024, Jio's ARPU reached 214.0 rupees. This is an absolutely vital metric because it represents a 3.78% increase from the previous fiscal year. Now, 3.78% might sound small, but remember the scale here. In a market of over 500 million users, a tiny percentage increase in ARPU translates to massive absolute revenue gains. The engine is definitely working. They're taking that raw material of user engagement and just squeezing a little bit more revenue out of it every single month. So, how exactly are they pushing this 214 rupee number higher? Well, the DRHP highlights a few specific levers. First up is 5G migration. By March 2024, they had successfully moved 268.5 million users onto 5G. That better experience naturally encourages users to adopt higher-tier plans. Second is fixed broadband upgrades, things like Jio Fiber and Jio Air Fiber, which command higher monthly fees. And finally, direct tariff increases. By bundling in digital benefits and content, Jio essentially nudges consumers to upgrade and recharge at higher price points. It is a very calculated, deliberate effort to continually open up that monetization valve. Let's move to Section 4, translating scale to cash, and see how this builds. We've seen the revenue per user, but how does that actually trickle down to cash generation? First, let's just appreciate the sheer scale of this operation. In just the 10 years since its commercial launch, Jio has brought in a total revenue of 1.46 trillion rupees. That is roughly 16.32 billion US dollars. The DRHP actually points out this makes it the largest business in India in terms of revenue created within that specific time frame. But as we know, top-line revenue is absolutely not the same thing as free cash flow. We have to map out the deductions to see the real picture. Okay, so here is the conceptual financial flow of the telecom engine. You start with revenue, which is just RPU multiplied by your total users. Then you deduct your operating costs, the day-to-day expenses of keeping the lights on and the network running, and that leaves you with EBITDA, which is a measure of operational profitability. But the machine doesn't stop there. You then have to subtract depreciation, the accounting cost of all those physical towers aging over time. And finally, you subtract capital expenditures, or CapEx. Only then do you arrive at your actual cash generation. And we really have to pause on CapEx because telecom is inherently a business of extreme capital intensity. Remember that physical foundation we talked about earlier? The DRHP proudly states that Jio deployed more than 1 million 5G cells in a single year. While that absolutely creates a massive competitive moat and drives data usage, building 1 million cell towers requires an immense amount of capital expenditure. This infrastructure reinvestment is the final massive friction point in the system. You have to subtract these continuous heavy CapEx requirements from your operating profits to find out what actual cash this engine is spitting out at the very end. Which perfectly leads us into Section 5, constraints on mobile economics. Because let's be real, no economic engine runs without at least a little bit of friction. What are the limits on Jio's pricing power? I want to show you a direct quote from the DRHP regarding a recent round of price hikes. They state it very plainly. Tariff increase also contributed to higher customer churn, leading to lower growth in our total customer base during fiscal 2024. This is basically the law of gravity in economics. When you turn up that ARPU valve by raising prices, you are inevitably going to lose some customers at the margins. So, the crucial point is understanding this incredibly delicate balancing act that Jio faces. The DRHP explicitly lists this as a risk factor. Future tariff increases might face serious resistance, particularly in the more price-sensitive segments of the Indian market. If they push that ARPU valve just a little too aggressively, customers might migrate back down to lower-value plans, or worse, they might jump ship entirely for a competitor. Jio has to find a way to grow the revenue per user without sacrificing the massive customer scale that makes this whole engine work in the first place. Let's wrap this up with Section 6, the engine in one picture. Let's pull back and put this entire analytical journey onto one screen. This right here is the complete Jio Telecom engine. It starts at the base with unmatched physical spectrum scale. That world-class network acts as a magnet, attracting 524 million customers. Through frictionless pricing and 5G upgrades, those exact customers are driven to a staggering 42.3 gigabytes of usage per month. Jio then monetizes that intense engagement by carefully turning the ARPU valve up to 214 rupees. That creates massive top-line revenue and operational EBITDA. And finally, After accounting for heavy depreciation and reinvesting through intense capex to maintain the network, what remains is the final output, actual cash generation. It's a perfect chain. Every single metric completely relies on the one right before it. Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative question to ponder. We saw that per capita data consumption has reached an astonishing 42.3 gigabytes per month. But trees don't grow to the sky, right? As physical data consumption inevitably nears its natural peak, can Jio actually continue to raise tariffs and grow ARPU without triggering mass churn and breaking the very scale that powers this incredible machine? It is the ultimate test of their economic model going forward. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll see you next time.